Hello learners, we continue with the chapter Nationalism in India for class 10th. This is in continuation of the previous session where I spoke about non-cooperation movement. Hopefully, you have all understood the events leading to the movement, the classes which participated and the reasons for its withdrawal. Before we begin, let us analyze quickly the non-cooperation movement. The analysis of the non-cooperation movement. It was the first major mass movement. Gandhiji's dream of asking all the masses to participate in the movement bore fruit when everyone participated. Second, the Hindu-Muslim unity was a major feature of the non-cooperation movement. Third, most importantly, there was emphasis on self-reliance through khadi. If you recall, the coming of the British had led to the complete destruction of our cottage industries. Gandhiji's emphasis on charkha and khadi allowed people to go in for self-reliance. There was tremendous success of boycott of foreign goods. There was also picketing of liquor shops. Now, there were some drawbacks too. One, alternative indigenous institutions like schools, colleges and courts were not set up. Second, khadi was more expensive than the British manufactured goods. India was a poor country and the poor could not carry out the Swadeshi campaign. The next phase of the national movement starts with the announcement of the Simon Commission. However, let us first see the learning outcomes. The student should be able to describe the Salt March and explain its significance in Indian history. They are able to demonstrate understanding of principles of non-violence and its impact on the national movement. Analyze the effectiveness of Gandhiji's non-violent means to achieve freedom from British colonialism. They should be able to locate places identified with the Salt March on a map. They should be able to assess the spread of the civil disobedience movement with the help of a map. But before we begin, let us first see Satyagraha. Now, Satyagraha was extremely important because a vast population of India could not be trained for warfare. Moreover, vast resources were required to train them. Thus, the only way to challenge the British and get independence was Satyagraha. Hence, if you recall, Gandhiji suspended the non-cooperation movement when news of Chauri Chaura came. He felt that the nation and the people were not ready to carry on a non-violent struggle. He did not want to give any chance to the British to clamp down on the Satyagrahis. Today, we will discuss the events from 1928 to 1931. There were two factors which faced Indian politics after the withdrawal of the non-cooperation movement. What were the economic conditions of India before the Simon Commission came? The first was the effects of worldwide economic depression of 1929. The agricultural prices began to fall from 1926 and collapsed after 1930. As the demands for agricultural goods fell and exports declined, peasants found it difficult to sell their harvests and pay their revenues. By 1930, countryside was in turmoil. In one such demonstration, Lala Lajpat Rai was beaten in UP and he later died of lathi wounds. There was widespread anger when news of this reached the people. In an effort to win them over, Lord Irwin announced in October 1929 a vague offer of dominion status for India in an unspecified future and a roundtable conference to discuss a future constitution. However, this did not satisfy the Congress leaders. Then, the Tory government in Britain constituted a statutory commission under Sir John Simon. This commission was formed to look into the functioning of the constitutional system in India and suggest changes. The problem was that the commission had no Indian member. They were all British and they had come to decide on Indian matters. So, when the commission came in India in 1928, it was greeted with the slogans of "Go Simon Back." You can see on the screen a small photograph which is displaying the banner "Simon Go Back." All parties, including the Congress and the Muslim League, participated in the demonstration. In response to the Simon Commission, landmark decisions were taken at the Lahore session of Congress 1929. In December 1929, under the presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Lahore Congress formalized the demand of Purna Swaraj or full complete independence for India. It was declared that 26 January 1930 would be celebrated as the Independence Day, when people were to take pledge to struggle for complete independence. It is to commemorate this event our constitution makers decided to adopt the constitution on 26th January. However, the celebrations attracted very little attention. So, Gandhiji decided to find a way to relate this abstract idea of freedom to concrete issues of everyday life. Let us first see an activity. Films are an effective way of developing students' understanding of events and processes. This short clip, taken from the film Gandhi by Richard Attenborough, focuses on the famous Salt March undertaken by Gandhiji. This short clip will enable students to understand why Gandhiji chose salt as a powerful symbol. Students may first read the section 3.1, the Salt March and the Civil Disobedience Movement. Teacher may then ask students to watch the film, The Salt March, Gandhi. The link has been given on the slide. After viewing the film, teacher may initiate a discussion on the following. 1. Why did Gandhiji choose salt to unite the nation in protest? Second, why was it also known as the Salt Satyagrah? Third, why was salt looked upon as a unifying factor? Fourth, did the salt become an effective symbol of resistance against colonialism? Now, let us see the Dandi March, and a lot of answers the students can get from the following. Mahatma Gandhi sent a letter of ultimatum. He gave his demands, and he said that if the demands were not fulfilled by 11th March, Congress would launch a civil disobedience campaign. Viceroy Irwin was unwilling to negotiate. So, Mahatma Gandhi started his famous Salt March accompanied by 78 of his trusted volunteers. He ceremoniously violated the salt law by boiling the sea water in Dandi on 6th April. This was the famous Dandi March or the Salt March. Thousands came to hear Gandhiji, and he told them what he meant by Swaraj and urged them to peacefully defy the British. Many joined in the march. There was violation of the salt law in many places. But the question which comes to mind is, why salt? Salt was required by all sections of society, irrespective of caste, creed or religion. Hence, It was a symbol of unity. It was freely available. Look at the map of India. Observe that India is a peninsula country. It is surrounded by water on 3 sides. Hence, salt was freely available. However, the British appointed special inspectors to destroy this naturally available salt. This was termed as national wastage by Gandhiji. Now, as per the non-cooperation movement, people were told to refuse to cooperate with the British government by not paying taxes and mass resignations. But civil disobedience movement asked not only to refuse cooperation with the British, but also to break colonial laws. Thousands in different parts of the country broke the salt law, manufactured salt and demonstrated in front of government salt factories. As the movement spread, foreign cloth was boycotted, liquor shops were picketed, peasants refused to pay revenue and chowkidari taxes, village officials resigned, and in many places forest people violated forest laws and they started going into the reserved forests to collect wood and graze cattle. He also encouraged people to use Indian goods or Swadeshi goods so that Indian industries get encouraged and British industries were hit. Now, the British did not lie still. They used repressive methods. The colonial government became worried by the developments of civil disobedience movement as people started breaking the laws. The British government began arresting the Congress leaders one by one. This led to violent clashes in many places. Abdul Ghaffar Khan, a devout disciple of Gandhiji, was arrested in April 1930. This angered the crowds and they staged demonstrations on the streets of Peshawar, facing armoured cars and police firing. Many were killed. A month later, Gandhi was arrested. Industrial workers in Sholapur attacked police posts, municipal buildings, law courts and railway stations, that is, the structures that symbolized the British rule. A frightened government responded with a policy of brutal repression. Peaceful satyagrahis were attacked. Women and children were beaten and about 100,000 people were arrested. Ultimately, Lord Irwin invited Gandhiji on the same table to hold discussions. This culminated in the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. By this, Gandhiji decided to call off the civil disobedience movement and entered into a pact with the Viceroy, Lord Irwin, on 5th March 1931. This is known as the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. By this pact, Gandhiji consented to participate in a round-table conference in London as Congress had boycotted the first round-table conference. The British government agreed to release the political prisoners who had not committed any violence. In December 1931, Gandhiji went to London for the conference. But the negotiations broke down and he returned disappointed. The repressive policies that were followed after the signing of the Gandhi-Irwin Pact is what we are going to understand now. Gandhiji had signed the Gandhi-Irwin Pact on 5th March 1932 and also called off the civil disobedience movement. He had gone to London to attend the conference as per the pact. Back in India, he discovered that the government had begun a new cycle of repression. Abdul Ghaffar Khan and Jawaharlal Nehru were both put in jail. Congress had been declared illegal and series of measures had been imposed to prevent meetings, demonstrations and boycotts. But by 1934, it lost its momentum. With great apprehensions, Gandhiji relaunched the civil disobedience movement and boycott movements. but it could not reach the momentum it had. Now let us see the classes which participated in the civil disobedience movement. The Patidas of Gujarat and UP. In the countryside, rich peasant communities like the Patidas of Gujarat and Jats of Uttar Pradesh were active in the civil disobedience movement because they were hard hit by the trade depression and falling prices. As their income decreased, they found it difficult to pay to the government the revenue, which resulted in widespread resentment. These rich peasants became enthusiastic supporters of civil disobedience movement. They organized their communities and at times forced a reluctant member to participate in boycott programs. For them, the fight for Swaraj was for the relaxation in the revenue system. They were deeply disappointed when the movement was called off in 1931 without the revenue rate being revised. So when the movement was restarted in 1932, many of them refused to participate. This was because if they failed to give the revenue on time, their lands were auctioned by the British. Because the Congress did not make any revision for the revenue demand, this is why they took this action. Now let us see the demands of the poor peasantry with the Congress during the civil disobedience movement. The poor peasantry were interested in not only in lowering of revenue demand, but many of them were small tenants cultivating land they had rented from the landlords. As the depression continued and cash income dwindled, the small tenants found it difficult to pay their rent. They wanted the unpaid rent to the landlords to be remitted. For this, they joined a variety of radical movements often led by socialists and communists. Congress was apprehensive of raising these issues as they thought that they might upset the rich peasants and landlords. So they were unwilling to support the no rent campaigns in most places. So the relationship between Congress and the poor peasants remained uncertain. Now let us see the business class and their reasons for joining the civil disobedience movement. During the First World War, Indian merchants and industrialists had made huge profits and had become powerful. They were keen on expanding their business activities, but the colonial policies were restricting their business, so they reacted against the colonial policies. They wanted protection against import of foreign goods and a rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio that would discourage imports. So to organize their business interests, they formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920 and Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries, FICCI. This was led by prominent industrialists like Purushottam Das Thakurdas and G.D. Birla. The industrialists attacked colonial control over Indian economy and supported the civil disobedience movement when it was first launched in 1930. Because during the First World War, the British had allowed them to set up factories. After the First World War, the restrictions continued. So, they gave financial assistance and refused to buy and sell imported goods. Most of the businessmen joined Swaraj at a time when colonial restrictions on business would no longer exist and trade and industry flourish without constraints. Hence, they wanted their own governments which will protect them. After the failure of Round Table Conference, the business groups were no longer uniformly enthusiastic. They were apprehensive about the militant activities and worried about prolonged disruption of business as well as growing influence of socialism among the younger members of the Congress. Now let us see the role of the industrial working class in civil disobedience movement. The industrial working class did not participate in civil disobedience movement in large numbers except in the Nagpur region. As the industrials came closer to the Congress, the workers stayed aloof. In spite of that, some workers did participate in the civil disobedience movement, selectively adopting some of the ideas of the Gandhian program, like boycott of foreign goods, as part of their own movements against low wages and poor working conditions. There were strikes by railway workers in 1930 and dock workers in 1932. In 1930, thousands of workers in Chota Nagpur tin mines wore Gandhi caps and participated in protest rallies and boycott campaign. But Congress was reluctant to include workers' demands as part of its program of struggle. It felt that this would alienate industrialists and divide the anti-imperial forces. We stop this session here and we will see the role of women in the next session. We will also see the folklore and the folk songs which were very, very important in developing nationalism and patriotism in India. Thank you.